Welcome to today's webinar. Our topic for today is Aging Safely, New Insights into the Impact of Bedroom Design on Resident Falls. My name is Megan Klein and I will facilitate our meeting. Please note, the information contained in this presentation is intended to provide general information, but not advice about certain regulations and initiatives. This is not intended as legal or other advice, and each situation may vary depending on the particular facts and circumstances. You should not act upon this information without first consulting qualified legal counsel. This webinar will be recorded. Today's webinar will be presented by our powerhouse panel of experts, Shirley Nichols, Erin Berry, and Liz Jensen. Shirley Nichols, the COO of SafelyYou, is an entrepreneur and a business leader with more than 20 years experience in healthcare technology. Focused on client success, Shirley applies her vast knowledge in technology and artificial intelligence to enhance SafelyYou's program. She has successfully decreased resident falls by 40% and emergency room visits by 80% in her partner memory care communities. She manages a team that has reviewed more than 15,000 videos of on-the-floor events and is passionate about sharing these learnings to help address the leading cause of injuries and hospitalization for older adults, especially those living with dementia. Erin Berry, a multiple award-winning interior designer, directs the strategic development and implementation of outstanding designs for senior living projects, and she works to evolve and differentiate Direct Supply's offerings in the market. Her experience in design, coupled with development and marketing expertise, gives her a unique and valued perspective on how project decisions impact operations. Erin's previous extensive experience in high-end hospitality and residential design has developed her aesthetic vision, while her architectural background allows her to detail interiors with a more critical eye. Liz Jensen is the Clinical Director with Direct Supply's Innovation and Technology Center at MSOE. She leads the Direct Supply Spark Collective, bringing together diverse professionals including clinicians, technology developers, engineers, and designers to collaborate, test, and pilot innovative technology, products, and services towards the aim of translating evidence-based research, regulations, and risk management strategies into practical processes that drive better outcomes and a reduced cost to care. She is the co-founder of the Senior Living Clinical Collaborative, a network of senior care CNOs committed to supporting clinical excellence in senior living, and is a frequent speaker at national and local conferences on advancing innovation within senior care. And now, please welcome Liz Jensen to get us started.
Megan, thank you so much. I so appreciate that. Welcome, Erin and Shirley. So glad to be with you today as well. And welcome to everyone on our attending our session today. We're thrilled that you have the time to join us, and we've really been looking forward to having the opportunity to talk with you about this unique topic. Today we're going to take a look at the following learning objectives, and we're going to take a fresh look at the problem of falls through these lenses. We know that caring for aging adults living with dementia is challenging for both the person living with dementia and their caregivers. Advances in technology are giving us new insights that benefit both residents and staff in improving what we know and how we apply what we know, with new insight into residents' intentions, motivations, and how they interact with their environment, specifically their bedroom. I'm thrilled to have this time with Shirley and Erin and looking at ways that we can explore actionable ways to address the residents' learning bedroom environment and better meet the residents' needs and help the staff members meet their needs as well. So as we get started here, I thought we'd take a few minutes just to talk about a few thoughts on aging that I wanted to share. You know, I think that caring as a nurse, caring for others is both a science and an art. And, you know, having the insights that we need in order to be able to provide the kind of care that we need to provide is really, really critical. As a nursing leader, I've spent a lot of time helping clinical teams think about the root causes when an adverse event occurs. We spend time investigating, looking at evidence that's available, and often come up lacking, honestly, in insights into what was actually probably going through someone's mind when the incident occurred. Oftentimes we can attribute a why. Sometimes something happened in the physical changes that occur with aging. For instance, vision changes, hearing changes, joint mobility, muscle loss, all of these things we know are normal parts of aging and really contribute to what we know about the science of caregiving. What is harder to determine is how self-aware a person is of these changes, or their attitudes, their desires, their motivations to continue to do the things they like to do. Our ability to know another person in this way is really where the art of caregiving comes into play. So aging is normal, but disease is not. And we can treat diseases, usually with medications, oftentimes. And as a result, both the normal aging brain and the body then are challenged by disease processes like dementia and the side effects of those medications. Living with dementia doesn't mean that a person loses their desires, attitudes, and motivations. It makes being able to act on those desires and motivations more challenging, and especially as the dementia progresses. What can be most frustrating sometimes are the challenges of communication, on understanding how to interpret or respond when a person makes a choice or engages in an action that leads to an increased risk for falls. When we don't have the full picture, our tendency is to act on what we do know, and which might be counterintuitive sometimes to what the residents' wishes are. So let's take a minute to look at what we do know about how we're reducing falls today, what our typical approach tends to be. You know, in a care setting, we rely on systems to guide our actions. We seek to use evidence-based practices when treating medical conditions, developing care plans, and honoring resident choices. Policies and procedures can help staff know what to do, when to do it, and what to do if something goes wrong. As a person's dementia progresses, staff are often doing more for a resident and not less over time. These practices really haven't changed much over the years. Teams really strive to do the best they can, I think, with what they do know. So what I think is really interesting about what technology is giving us the chance to do is to really challenge us to say, are we asking the right questions? And what do we actually know? So what do we actually know about the conditions and risk factors that lead to falls? This has actually been a guiding question for a falls action research project that we've been leading out of our Innovation and Technology Center, and asking this question of providers and caregivers to better understand where the gaps might exist in this process. We know that research matters, and it has given us important knowledge into the science of reducing falls. Policies and procedures can keep us on a path, but not always the path that leads to more answers. And we know that fresh perspectives keep us alert and motivated for change. Ongoing research matters for its validation or uncovering new information. So what's interesting is the evidence consistently points us to the impact that exercise in particular, specifically balance, strength, and resistance training can have on reducing falls. And we know that evidence shows that it does work. We also have evidence that says that the benefits of medication reduction as well as staff education also can work. And in particular, the use of fall huddles are helpful as well. Fall huddles are interesting. They're impactful in a number of ways. It gives the team the opportunity to investigate a fall more quickly, and hearing from those who might have important knowledge about what actually happened in the situation. It can lead to changes in interventions on the care plan, which is always good. And it's really interesting that it can also positively impact how staff learn. Huddles help caregivers, what I like to call, make sense. They're sense making. They make sense of what happened. We learn from each other when we can hear from each other. It's a powerful way to develop critical thinking and team building as well when we're working together on solving a problem, specifically sometimes as complex as falls. So science has given us better insights into the physical and system issues around falls, but what has been more elusive is understanding how those resident choices, attitudes, and motivations translate into actions. This is harder to understand and varies by person, thus the art of caring. I have long suspected that this plays a bigger role in falls than we've understood, but we've really struggled in the past with having good evidence to make better decisions. So what's really great about some of the advances we're seeing in technology in particular is that it's changing what we know. It's giving us insights that can help us better understand what might be motivating a resident's actions and choices that lead up to them being found on the floor. And once we know more, then we can make different choices. And that's really what today is all about. So innovative technology is giving us new information, it's giving us new insights, and what we are learning is actually a lot. We're learning more about resident behavior, we're learning more about the role of the environment, and we are learning more about what actually happened, giving us better insight to tailor a clinical response to the resident's specific needs. So at this point, I'm gonna invite Shirley to come and share with us a bit, take us through some examples of what this actually looks like and how we can start to use technology to think differently about what has happened.
Thanks, Liz. So on that note, we will be going through a few case studies where SafelyYou's AI-enabled cameras detected the fall event and captured how the fall occurred. Our cameras are mounted in the corner of the bedrooms where 80% of falls do occur and 94% are unwitnessed. So today we're going to review both some still frames and an actual video of a fall event with, of course, with permission from families. And so kind of going on with what Liz has been talking about, you know, the information that we've gathered, you know, with all of our fall reviews and fall huddles with our communities, we want to be able to bring some of that insight for you here today. So we'll start off with our first case. Here you will notice that the care staff has already entered the room. So the point of us wanting to share with you first kind of what happens today, what typically happens, right? So a care staff would walk into the room, they would find a resident on the floor, and at that point, you know, there's a series of protocols and policies and procedures that would happen thereafter. But of course, in memory care, this can be very challenging because unfortunately they may not be able to communicate how they fell or what were they doing prior to the fall that might have caused it. And so, of course, when care staff come into the room, we want to make sure that, you know, they do as much, you know, scene investigation and obviously aiding to the resident's care. So Liz, you know, in regards to kind of seeing this bird's eye view, obviously this is kind of a new scene for you from this perspective as opposed to being on the floor. Can you maybe kind of articulate what are the kind of basic policies and procedures that you would see with our communities when they do find a resident on the floor?
Yeah, I think, from a nursing perspective, if we don't know what happened, we have to assume that some sort of a fall occurred and that the resident potentially could be injured. And so, being able to do an assessment and evaluate the resident, making sure that if they have been injured, that we can treat them as such. And, where she's at right now is actually a tough spot because she's really very close to the wall and close to the chair. So probably have to move some things. I think, the other thing that we'd probably end up doing then if we felt like she was okay was just try to get her off the floor. We want to try to resolve that for her as soon as we can and as safely as we can.
For sure. I mean, if you don't imagine, obviously care staff walk in the room, they obviously want to make sure they're safe and actually stable. And the likelihood is a resident's asking you, help me get up, right? And so,
right.
So typically, you only have a few minutes, during that event, obviously asking for also radioing for support to come in to help with that transfer. And so what we want to do on the next still frame is actually show you, in a sense, what actually happened. And so here you'll see that she's actually self-transferring, right? And so she's self-transferring. This is kind of a small picture here, but it's actually pretty far. So for where she was sitting in her lazy boy, for her to actually pivot, and then she'd have to shuffle herself a couple times to do a full transfer, and then to get herself into the wheelchair. What we actually witnessed in the video is that the wheelchair is unlocked, which unfortunately is fairly common because a resident might wheel themselves into the room. They don't know where the lock is, right? And so then they transfer themselves. And when they get back in, unfortunately, it's still unlocked and then it gets away from them. So here, what does happen is she attempts to transfer. She's not able to make the full pivot, and then the wheelchair gets away from her, and then she does fall to the floor. So as you can see here, again, from a layout and design perspective, I'm sure, Erin, you're kind of, wanting to be able to offer some insight here. What are some of the quick takeaways that you can see from the still frame?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you look at this still frame and there's just absolutely no place for a wheelchair to be for a safe transfer, right? She's got furniture taking up the whole wall, a sofa, a recliner, so I think I would ask a couple of questions of, you know, do we need to have that much furniture in here, right? So, do we need 2 chairs? Do we need just a sofa? We need to have a place for her to safely transfer into that wheelchair. So does she need that much furniture in this space? A couple of other observations too is that, she's got a little kind of small side table all the way across the room. Should we have a place for that side table over next to her furniture where she can, safely put things? And then one other observation too is that there's really no secondary light here. If she needs to operate a light, she has to go across the room and flip a switch. So, could we provide some sort of secondary light for her so that she can manage her own light levels if she needs to?
Yeah, Shirley, that's so well, Erin is so insightful. And, one thing that you mentioned about the furniture too, and, it makes me wonder, oftentimes from a caregiving perspective, we're trying to make sure that we've got enough room to move things as well, right? So if she does have a wheelchair or, if she needed a sit to stand lift for, some reason for transferring, being able to get equipment into the room can be challenging sometimes if there's a lot of furniture in a room. So we're not always, sometimes we're thinking as, what do we need? What do caregivers need first before we think about what the design is actually doing to the resident?
Yeah, and even to the point of, also looking at some of these furniture pieces. So that lazy boy probably came from home, right? And so, you want to be accommodating to move-ins, especially for family one, to make sure that this resident feels comfortable with their new environment. So we definitely can appreciate that. But, when we notice that she, on this video, we notice that she doesn't have the core, to be able to actually self-transfer at this point. And so again, is that triggering then our change of condition? And some of that might involve replacing that lazy boy. Also, for those on the line, do not use the reclining piece of the lazy boy, because that is a top area of concern for us. We've seen unfortunate many falls because, the resident doesn't know how to put down the footrest, right? And so they think it's a part of the seat, and then unfortunately we see those type of falls as well. But again, just being aware that the room design does have to evolve based off of the residents' mobility, their status, and just kind of reevaluating things that's available.
Well, and Shirley, I just want to comment on that too with the comfort piece of it. Again, nursing family, we're thinking about like, how do we help the resident be comfortable? Like you said, this might have been a favorite chair, that she had at home. And we're thinking about comfort, pain management, is this best for her skin? What are all those things that kind of go through our clinical science mind? And sometimes we need to think differently about what the impact is of those devices.
For sure. So on our next case, this is actually going to be the same resident just a couple months later. And this is actually a video clip. And in this video, you'll see, she's going to be sitting here on the couch. And we'll go ahead and play the video and I can kind of talk you through it. So here she's sitting on her couch first. She's actually looking for her TV remote. And so she doesn't want to hurt her knee. So you saw she pulls down this pillow and she's going to lower herself to the floor while she looks for her TV remote. She does have a little bit of a roll, so just be prepared for that. She's totally safe and she's no injuries. But she does, she's adamant in looking for this TV remote as she wants to change the channel. She's watching Big Bang Theory right now, so she wants to change the channel. And so you see that where she kind of does a little bit of that tumble there. And we had paused that video, but what actually happens is that she's so determined that she actually scoots herself to the TV and actually still tries to like change that TV from the floor. And then within, again, a few seconds later, she actually noticed her wheelchair is actually at that doorway. And then she actually scoots herself to the wheelchair to even try to get herself up. Thankfully, with SafelyYou's process, we actually triggered the community to go to her aid. And so care staff does appear into the room and do help her at that point and make sure obviously she has no injuries, and then make their decisions from there. But the point here of obviously as you saw in the first still frame, right? She actually, what they thought that she was able to transfer herself. And at this point now the community learned from that video, and they actually now started storing the wheelchair, away from her so she doesn't try to transfer on her own. But let's go ahead and kind of talk again about this kind of lessons learned here. Again, both from a design perspective and obviously from a clinical perspective. Liz, any thoughts here?
Yeah, I've seen this. You've shared this video with me when we were preparing for this, and I just from a nursing perspective, it doesn't get any easier. It's from a human perspective to see it in that, feeling of worry that she's going to be, injured. But I think what's so interesting about what we learned from this is, first of all, I know that she ultimately ends up by the wheelchair in the hallway there. And so when staff come in, if this is all they know and they find her on the floor by the wheelchair, we're going to make the decision or the assumption that she fell, perhaps walking while she was trying to get to her wheelchair, not understanding that she was being intentional about putting herself on the floor, that she knew she needed the pillow for her knees, and that she was trying to, do something, and she was motivated to change the channel. Like you said, the insight that gives us about what her desires are is something we just have not had good knowledge about before. We have to always try to piece that together. And so that, I think, for me, becomes really powerful then when we're reviewing this together as a staff, team members, the other things that people will start to think about and be prepared for.
Yeah, it can also be just a real aha moment too, right? And knowing that she is looking for her remote control, your eye immediately goes to this sofa that she's on, right? It's clutter, it's pattern, it's just who could find a remote control on that sofa? I couldn't. And then your eye goes to the cluttered side table over next to the closet. So there's a lot of things here that can be cleaned up. We certainly want the residents to be able to have, those beloved things from home. But, Shirley and I were talking, I think last week, and we said, well, could we have turned that quilt into maybe a pillow and, kind of reduced the amount of pattern? We know a lot of different patterns are really hard for residents with dementia. So could we do some things differently here in this room that would really clean it up and give her easier access to that remote control?
Yeah, and even on the wheelchair perspective, the fact that she, could have also been cued, by the wheelchair within her line of sight. Some things that we've also learned with our communities is, if there's a bathroom, in the apartment, then why don't we, if she can't use it anyway, let's just collapse it and put it in the shower, so just completely out of sight. It would actually really minimize any risks of them wanting to transfer on their own. And ultimately, we just want to make her safe, right? So if we also know that she does self-lower, which we're going to go through some of these statistics later, well, how do we just make sure she's safe, in doing that? And so if she can't actually go from a sit to stand, then if she's going to lower, then let's just make sure it's, the most safe process for her to do that, and to obviously notify care staff to support her. So we have one more case to review. So again, I wanted to kind of share that still frame of what does it actually look like when care staff actually enter the room, because this is what most of the communities without SafelyYou, are going through. So here, care staff walk into the room, and the resident is laying flat on her back. So Liz, do you want to kind of take this one again?
Yeah, sure. Again, seeing her, finding her, first of all, it's always shocking to find somebody on the floor. But, thinking that, did she try to get up and walk? Was she, the chair's kind of pushed away. It doesn't maybe look like she was trying to transfer, but I would be thinking about, again, assessing to see if she's been injured. And if it's safe enough for us to be able to get her off the floor, that we want to be able to do that as quickly as we can. But we're not always thinking about like kind of what's happening around us either environmentally to try, and later we have to kind of come back and piece it together, try to remember like, okay, where were things and what might have she been trying to do?
right? Today we can't rewind, without the camera, and so this obviously gives us that opportunity that we can rewind and pause and really analyze. And even what we're doing right now, with the three of us, this is a fall huddle, right? And so what we actually are doing is we're approaching falls today with a multidisciplinary approach where we can actually rewind and replay these events that are typically unwitnessed. And so we'll take a look at actually how this fall now occurs here. So this resident, she actually saw her shoes, by the bedside, but she couldn't reach them. But she's pretty determined and she's ready to get out of her room. So she's cued by her shoes, and she actually just self-lowers herself. So she just kind of slowly lowers herself to the floor. There is a fall mat there. It's black right now, so you can't really see it. But she does lower herself safely to the floor, and then SafelyYou does trigger care staff to come and aid with her. But within, again, the minute before care staff enter the room, she decides to just lay down because she's not able to get up on her own. So when care staff do enter, they would have assumed, again, she would have fallen. But with the video, they're able to see that it was not a fall at all. She was just trying to get her shoes on. She's ready to, join the rest of her, neighbors in the activity room. And so, again, just that insight, helps minimize any excessive, additional care planning changes or things like that, or, unnecessary ER visits, right? So especially during COVID times, if you find someone on the floor, you're very challenged on whether or not do you take that chance and take them to the ER. But being able to witness this, they didn't have to do that. Erin, obviously there's some opportunity here from a room design.
Yeah, for sure. Also, knowing that she was triggered by her shoes, I would ask myself, could I reimagine her storage options? So should there be items that are on display for her to, easily be able to access, but then should we be putting things away? When she takes her shoes off, should we be storing those away, for the next time? So could it be a little bit less dangerous for her to interact with? I have to say too, the layout of the room is not ideal. She doesn't really have any good kind of bedside table with clear space. Again, the lighting levels are very dark here. You can't even see where the fall mat is. I know we're in a bird's eye view, but again, I feel that this room is very dark. The lamp is placed all the way across the room, so very difficult for her to navigate again. So, how could we kind of move some more sturdy furniture over near her bed with a lamp so she has a little bit more access to things?
Yeah, I think that, again, these insights are just so important. See even some of the extra supplies, it looks like, that are on her bedside table, and it's hard for me to see what might be there, but I'm gonna guess it's maybe briefs or wipes or things like incontinence supplies that could probably lend themselves to having some better storage, as well.
Yep.
Yeah. This is super helpful. I think, as we look at now some of the, let's take a look, I guess, at Shirley, I'd love to hear your thoughts a little bit on some of the actual outcomes that you've been able to gather through the evaluation of some of these videos, and the sheer number, I think, of videos that you've been able to see and to tag and to look at issues. So I'm going to turn it over to you and ask you to just walk us through some of that.
Yeah, for sure. So SafelyYou has observed over 15,000 on-the-ground detections, and we're really passionate about understanding why and how these events occur. So we've taken a look at our most recent falls and found that 40% of those detections are actually intentionally self-lowering. So of the couple of the case studies that you just saw of just being cued by her shoes and she just self-lowered, or even that TV remote, although she did have a little bit of a role, residents are just intentionally lowering themselves because they want to get up. They want to get out of bed, which is 78% of the time. So they know that they don't want to fall, but they're just lowering themselves, and unfortunately they just can't get back up. And so understanding, how do we create that environment to keep them safe, but also how do we actually learn from, when are these actually events are happening so we can support them during that transfer. The next item that we learned is, what activity is happening before a true fall event? And most of the time, 53%, they are walking or standing. So that's where we'd really want to understand, from a mobility access, and also type of mobility, right? To make sure that they are safe when they're ambulatory. And then sitting, so typically they might be in a chair or that lazy boy chair that we just talked about. So again, them transferring out of that sitting position, and maybe, reassessing again what they're sitting on, the type of chair, the type of bed, so that they can successfully transfer. And then of course, laying down, those would include the events where maybe they rolled out of bed. And then the last bullet here was actually really surprising. So 22% of our falls are actually silent. And what that means is that the resident fell and actually got back up on their own. And so nobody would have known about it without SafelyYou. 22% of communities that don't have a technology like SafelyYou, unfortunately, are considered unknown, right? And they could have actually resulted in an injury of unknown origin, which we all know is, also extremely challenging for the community and for the families. But with SafelyYou, we've been able to detect those, and it makes up 22% of all of our falls. And most of the time they are walking, and it also occurs throughout the day. So the graph on the right that you see here is the volume of falls by hour of day is on the bottom. And what this shows is obviously the time and the peaks of when falls typically occur, which is, the early morning hours and then that evening hour. But what it's also telling us is that silent falls, is the blue bar that goes across, is that those actually happen at constant, at any time of day when a resident is alone in their room. They could be falling and getting back up on their own. And so again, the stress is about their environment. How do we keep them safe, and making sure their design is appropriate? Any feedback here? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. This is always just, as Erin said earlier, an aha. I think that not knowing, when somebody has fallen and gotten back up on their own, and having to try to piece all of that together as a nurse, when you might be, trying to understand why somebody is having pain and investigating that, and it leads to more tests and it leads to a recognition that there might be an injury of unknown origin, and then all of the activities that triggers from those points, the investigative process, the reporting process. I mean, there's just this ongoing, scale of, work that has to be done then. And I think that, through those processes sometimes, then we're looking at staff, we're trying to understand, was there, possibly an issue of abuse or neglect. Those are things that are so difficult to try to investigate and to try to understand what actually happened, and being able to nip all of that in the bud, come right back to say, okay, what actually did happen, and can we get a little bit more insight into that? And I think that the consequences of having that information impact a lot of things today that we've not been able to manage well before. Okay, so super interesting. One last comment here on here as well. I think that, we've known, a lot of the clinical teams that I've worked with, they know that early morning, late morning, or in the evening, when residents may need to go to the bathroom, first waking up right before bed, shift change, those sorts of things are higher times when, typically when falls occur. One of the things I know, Shirley, we talked about the other day a little bit, is just even thinking about your staffing levels then when you've got data like this, and the shift change, component of that, and are there ways to stagger that, and ways to use, this new knowledge now to manage your team better?
Yeah, for sure. The time of day it's always been there for us, since we started, that we know falls will always occur between, the 3 a.m. and the 7 a.m. and always like right after dinner. And so it's just telling there's definitely some residents that just want to get out of bed sooner, than other times. And there's definitely a lot of residents that are not ready to go to bed, right? And so after dinner, they, are in their bedroom. And unfortunately, that's also, again, where that peak happens. So trying to understand that pattern, maybe even having late night, activities, is helpful for some of those residents, to keep them engaged, and then when they're actually ready to go to bed. So there's definitely ways to understand this data to change some operational things within the community.
Yeah, some of the additional technology that we're investigating are things like passive radar, technology too, that can help us understand sleeping patterns and breathing, and all these other elements that might be able to give us some additional data points that bring more information into the process too. So it's just, again, it's information that we didn't have available to us before. I'm going to turn it over to you, Erin, and love to hear, your thoughts on just the space itself.
Yeah, definitely. Just looking at the data from the last slide, it's very encouraging to me to have the access to this kind of data and technology. As designers and architects, we often think about the condition of the resident when they come into the community, right? So we're kind of designing for that first look, that first kind of like marketing feel of the community sometimes. But to really understand that change of condition over time, and how we can start designing for that, I think is going to be really impactful to, kind of a more outcomes-based design. So as you can see here on the slide, memory care rooms have not changed very much over the past 30 years or so. We have approximately the same square footage. We've got the same window placements, closet locations, bathroom layouts. I think the biggest change that you see here is the removal of the kitchenettes in many of these units, which is a good thing. So, here you enter through the room through a smaller vestibule. You have access to the bathroom door as soon as you come in. You round the corner and you've got a bed and you've got closets. I think here you can see by the footprints that a lot of these residents have direct access to their closets first. So when they wake up in the middle of the night, do they go to their closet thinking that perhaps it's a bathroom? So where are these instances of falls that we could perhaps design out of? In contrast to the unchanging kind of built environment, you see along at the bottom of the screen, I've put some advances in cellular technology. So you see here this gigantic non-portable, portable phone in the 90s. And then now most of us are wearing smartwatches on our wrists, right? So if our technology is advancing that quickly, perhaps maybe our built environments should too, to really embrace that new technology. We really hope to get to a point where design and construction of a building really kind of becomes the foundation to support the well-being of a person. Can we help a resident be independent longer with the design of their environment? And we're looking as architects and designers to really create a more adaptable and flexible space for that continuum of care. So I really think the visual data that we're able to gather from a lot of these recordings could really fundamentally change how we design room layouts, the functionality of these rooms, the materiality, the furniture design and placement for the memory care communities. So we really do have the potential here to use an evidence-based process to develop design solutions that are really kind of rooted in research. And I think that'll really just help us achieve a lot safer environments.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I just looking at these still frames here on the design of the beds real quick, Brian. So even if you're to look at, your designs on all of them, a lot of times residents have a preference of what side they like getting out of bed, for example, like we all probably do.
Yeah.
And so if any resident here likes getting out on the left-hand side, if they're walkers there, how could they possibly, move themselves all the way around the bed to get out? Like just things that we wouldn't think about,
Right. We would totally take it for granted.
Yeah, but it's very much real today that we see that residents have a preference. Of course they do, right? And so how do we adjust that to that design and make sure there's enough space around that bed? And especially a lot of times you might move in and that bed is going to be that queen size bed or the full size bed, right? And then it changes to the twin and then it ends up changing to a hospital bed. And again, making sure that space keeps accommodating the needs of the mobility aids.
Yep, absolutely. Right now, these spaces are not flexible. They're not adaptable to the changing conditions. They are static and completely unchanging, really over the decades. And then, so in the next slide, we're going to start looking at kind of the resident room furniture. So when it comes to resident room furniture, we've typically been pretty hands-off from a design perspective. So we design model rooms that show families how home-like a unit can be and how beautiful a unit can be upon, kind of first impact in that first marketing tour. But really rarely do we make true recommendations based on the safety and kind of falls risk of a resident. We never show mobility aids in our model rooms or any other products that could aid in the safety of the resident. Very rarely are we showing, lift assist recliners and things like that. And we typically don't design multiple model rooms for the change in condition. So, we're designing for that first boom impression. It looks great, beautiful. It looks like a hotel. Can't wait for mom and dad to move in. But, maybe if we showed a progression, stages of what that room could look like, and really take the opportunity from a care standpoint to walk the family through, how the resident can interact with the room and what's there, and what could they bring from home, and maybe talk to them through that. It could just be a better experience, and the family would be a lot more informed as well.
Mhm.
I think we often look at the materiality, and I'm talking kind of flooring, wall color, secondary lighting, like decorative lighting and things like that. And in a lot of these communities, we're kind of matching what's already happening in the assisted living and independent living part of the community. So if you have a resident going from maybe assisted living into memory care, we're trying to kind of help ease that transition, right? Like, we don't want it to be a huge stark difference. But I think there's a lot of things that we can do. And again, the advance in technology, a lot of these materials are becoming a little bit smarter. They're becoming a little bit safer. And so, I think going forward, we should be looking at really the advancement in materials in these rooms as well.
Erin, I thought I had, as you shared this information and just the insight that brings around, helping people see the progression. It certainly aligns with a finding from our Falls Action Research Project and design thinking sessions we've done with assisted living providers, where we've heard about, the need to set expectations or to communicate expectations, and, about what to expect. And, that transition process rarely happens. It rarely is a planned process. Many times it's a crisis that is, initiated the process, where mom fell at home or she's been hospitalized, and we realize now that it's time for her to move. And so there's a lot of emotion often that's involved in that initial move-in process too. Being able to help give people as much information as possible, and helping them match what the reality is with what the life could be like for the resident,
right,
and all the benefits that come with that. I think we've heard from providers that that's a gap. And so, to the degree we could help to bridge some of that through design and through thoughtful conversations around it, could probably contribute to helping with that problem.
Yeah, completely agree.
All right, so let's take a look at, I think this is really interesting too. And again, Shirley, if you could walk us through some of the data and the findings that you've had related specifically to environment observations.
Yeah, so kind of taking, again, analysis of our most recent falls focused around the environment. We have found that 59% of falls, the room is cluttered. So kind of what we saw on our case studies, where you'd see, there's definitely surface areas that are available, but unfortunately we kind of stack a lot of stuff on top of the surface areas. So really kind of decluttering the room, would actually help in regards to at least finding things, especially with on that couch, not being able to find, the TV remote. And then the second bullet here is that 25% of falls, the closet door is open. And so in some of Erin's, room designs, you notice how within, when you're sitting at the bed, you can actually see the closet door. And the reason why we look at that is that we believe that when the closet door is opened, you're cued to want to close it. I know I am, so I know if I hate seeing closet doors open. My kids are always leaving doors open. I'm always closing them, right? And so, but especially in my bedroom, I always want to close that closet. And so again, how do we just minimize from a workflow, for care staff as part of their wellness checks, just pick up a few things, reorganize some of the room a little bit, and just close the closet door, right? And then here, 18% of falls, we actually do see a floor mat present. We actually thought this should be higher, because we do think that, as people's fall risk increases, we do put a lot more floor mats down. But just understanding, what type of floor mat, is appropriate for that resident. We've seen, there's obviously a different range of floor mats that Direct Supply has available to you, but a lot of times if the resident is using a walker, make sure it's a firm, floor mat with a beveled edge. A lot of our communities didn't realize that those are even available, right? And so just making sure that depending on the resident's need, and if we're seeing them self-lower and they don't have mobility aid, make sure it's the softest kind, that help them when they do lower themselves to the floor. And then 46% of falls in room is actually dark. And so Erin kind of called out on our case study how there wasn't secondary lighting, within an arm's reach for the resident to be able to turn on and off lighting for them. Unfortunately, we see a lot of just ceiling lights where the resident would have to actually get up, turn off the light at the doorway. And so making sure, again, either you're using secondary lighting or maybe you have the automated, illuminated lights that are triggered by motion. Sometimes those could be disruptive to a resident, but again, just kind of addressing, making sure there's enough illumination when needed. And then here we'll share with you also how mobility aids have also contributed to falls. So only 15% of our falls do we actually see the resident using it properly. And the reason for that is really because a mobility aid, majority of the time, 55% of the time, it's actually out of reach or improperly placed. So unfortunately, we've seen, where the walker's reversed, or the walker, is at a different angle or just a little bit too far. Same thing with even wheelchairs, right? And so if the wheelchair's not at that right 45-degree angle, unfortunately, the resident actually might use it as a walker, instead. And so they aren't using it properly. And so again, how do we use that space to make sure that the environment is a safe condition, but then also the mobility aids, making sure that it's placed in the right manner, or even not within their line of sight. So those are just things and key takeaways that we've noticed with our most recent fall events.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just a thought to add here too that we've shown some of the videos and given some of this insight to some of our technology developers and designers, engineers, and where you start to see the sparking of ideas then where, they can see the problems that are occurring and bringing that engineering mindset or that, human focused engineering design mindset that they have to bring their science into against this problem. We've already been hearing about ideas that people, that they're working on and incubating and thinking about around this, because they can actually see how the resident moves in the room in a different way. And so, new information, good information, can help. I mean, it really can help with sparking new innovation in other areas and other ways of thinking. Okay, great. So, let's, when we were preparing for this, we talked amongst ourselves, like, really, what do we think the future holds? And I shared a little bit of that as we've gone through some of the things that we're seeing from a technology perspective. But, let's take a look at it through the lens of some really practical things. I mean, I think that, taking what we've seen here and turning it into action is what actually makes a difference. And, how do we help utilize what we've learned, and or for implementing technology in a community, helping the people learn how to use that technology in the best way possible. Management change process is hard, and it doesn't matter even if something's cool and interesting and delightful, there still is very much a flow and a process that happens in these systems that run in care settings like this. And so helping teams be a part of the implementation process, thinking through what comes next, what other policy changes might have to occur, getting the end users involved early in the process, evidence has shown that increases the usability of the tool and their buy-in of it as well. And so that's really critical. The other area I think is really another area to look at then is in that area of process, policies, procedures, checklists. Actually, Shirley's shared with us some great tools that the SafelyYou team has put together. There's you do any kind of Google search for falls, related assessment tools. There's a lot that's out there. having something that's tailored for your environment, and taking a little bit of time to use something that's been tailored specifically, for instance, in dementia care, is super helpful. And I think these are some immediate actionable things that, regardless if you've got technology installed yet, you can already start to benefit from. Shirley, would you like to take us through the kind of the last two thoughts here?
Yeah, in regards to, taking, things into action here, I mean, from a process perspective and fall huddles, we really want to try and drive change here, of what can we learn and how do we collaborate better to really drive change in fall programming. And so, being collaborative, especially like us here on the call, and really wanting to be able to share these thoughts with others and trying to bring other experts into the conversation is really critical, especially when we have this great insight, for sure.
And then I think for places, I think using the opportunity for really change of condition to evaluate that environment kind of as you go, right? So like when you move in is one point where you can really evaluate the environment and the furniture and work with the families. And then that, that other pivot into as the change of condition for their mobility and things like that change, then you can use, the care staff and the families, and you can work together to really evaluate what's happening in that room and what are some really good things that we can change immediately. Just things like adding a nightstand and a table lamp could really, help change a scenario, greatly.
I know we've seen, and Shirley mentioned too, the motion censored lights, not always good for everyone, but in some instances, even being able to use things that are that aren't actually installed, but they're stick on, or they're they can be removed if they're not working for the resident. There's a number of different types of things that can be tried, I think, too. And sometimes we have to work through some of that in order to find the right mix of something, for a resident. Shirley, you mentioned the huddles, and I did mean to talk about that earlier. And just a note on that, I think some of the huddles that I've observed, and in talking with other nursing leaders about concerns around huddles, that just to be some watch out fors. The making sure that the huddle is an opportunity for everyone to contribute. Sometimes at the speed of things, the huddle can feel very rote, or there's a person in charge and they've got their checklist and they're moving through it kind of quickly. But recognizing that the need for all the people that are involved in the huddle to be able to contribute, to have time to share what they saw, to ask questions, to contribute ideas. That's where sometimes those good nuggets of insight come from that we didn't have before. And it's also the way that we learn from each other too. It's a way for us to hear what other people are thinking, and it's a way for them to learn from us. And so for the leaders that are on the group, those are just some nuggets that we've been collecting from nursing leaders and others that have been conducting huddles and have observed huddles, how they've worked and where they have found some opportunities for improvement.
We've also, Liz, on top of that, we've actually started this whole fall champion, kind of messaging from SafelyYou, is that, every community should have a fall champion, somebody that's just a little bit more versed, understands it, in all, products. So everything from independent living to AL to memory care. And having that champion will always be kind of an extra set of eyes to kind of see these opportunities and help with staff training and things like that, and the learnings, right? And to be able to also share successes, especially when you've avoided falls, or you've seen a proper transfer from care staff, like promoting that, and that champion kind of helps kind of drive that culture change that SafelyYou is like really trying to charge, because we believe it's all about empowerment on the floor.
Yeah, I for sure, Shirley. I think having a well-trained fall champion also gives you the opportunity for another set of eyes to look at things critically. In assisted living or memory care in particular, if a resident's moving in and bringing equipment that they were using at home, and they haven't had an evaluation by a therapist, for instance, or a RN, or someone that's looked at the kind of equipment that they've been using at home, sometimes we'll see, wheelchairs that haven't been fitted properly, or there's a lack of a cushion in the chair that maybe there needs to be one, or the chair that's not the right size, or there's not the right, anti-tip back devices on it. So having someone who can become more knowledgeable about what to look for, I think really can make a difference, and making sure that the equipment and the products that somebody's bringing in are safe for them to use. So Erin, would you like to walk us through some ideas around how we look to the future of really memory care design?
Yeah, definitely. I know for one, my team of architects and designers are very jazzed to get started on digging into this kind of future of memory care design. I think, as an industry, we've done a lot of research and design in the common areas related to kind of the psychological and physical wellness of the residents. We've done a lot of changes in those areas. We've gone from, racetrack designs to small neighborhoods to big neighborhoods, natural light, single loaded corridors, like you name it, we've tried it all to see what really has the best impact on the residents. But I don't think that we've had as strong of a focus on the units themselves, which is kind of unfortunate. I think we have to take a look and kind of have some vulnerability ourselves and say, hey, listen, like this is something that really needs to be focused on. Now that we have the data, it's going to be a lot easier to take a look. So we're really kind of ready to deep dive into that, using the new technology, the new insights. Not only that, but just really the advances in materials and also visual modeling that we can do to create specific scenarios for the residents and their abilities. So, what you see here on the screen is kind of a small list of really a lot of the components that we can focus on of the unit design. We know that square footage has been a pretty constant number over the years. We are likely going to be restricted here always. So how can we be smarter about how we're using the square footage? Really, even like some small tweaks can lead to a more efficient outcome too. So, if you take a look at this built-in over on the right-hand side, there's areas that are hidden from view from the residents. There's areas that are accessible. Now, don't kill me. I took this as a concept image from the internet. I'm sure someone would use this to climb up like a ladder. So I'm not saying let's go with this design, but as you can see, you have some areas that are on display. You could display the outfit for the day, the shoes for the day, and then you could hide other things away that perhaps maybe like those care things that you really don't want the resident to have access to. And just something else to note is there's always going to be cost to innovation, right? So, but if we can lead that to maybe longer stays, increased wellness, more efficient staff, then I really think the benefits kind of outweigh those initial construction costs. That's always going to be a big question: is how much more does that cost to do this, to do this thing? But I think if you're really leading with wellness and longevity, kind of at the top of mind, I think it's always worth it.
Mm-hmm. I love that insight, Erin, and having, been a nurse in long-term care for a long time, I think seeing the designs that we've been faced with over the years, the cinder block, rooms, double rooms, quadruple room. I mean, I love too that you have infection prevention on here. I think that, coming out of, as we come through the pandemic, we know that there's a lot there. There's a lot of learnings there. I think that providers have taken, and I think that there's going to be a lot of opportunity to rethink what spaces look like, to keep people safe and to improve quality of life. So it's an exciting time, I think, to think about that. That's great. Thank you, Erin. I appreciate that. So, we've loved this conversation. I think, we know we're coming up on the end of our hour together, and I'd love to just kind of ask Erin and Shirley for their final thoughts on, what other areas do you hope, technology will be able to, address in the future? What else do you think? What do you think kind of comes next in this space? Put you on the spot.
I could go.
Yeah.
There's about 1 million things that I think that we could focus on, and it's all really exciting. I think focusing on the connectivity as we come out of this kind of COVID, spell, I think focusing on connectivity for our residents, figuring out ways to get them more socially in the mix. I think getting people to connect with their family better. I think technology can play a huge role in that connectivity. And then I think, Liz, you talked about a little bit about the radar detection, right? Like how can we help kind of passively monitor people so that we can really help with the efficiency of the care staff. I'm really excited about that. I'm excited about the kinds of things that can monitor people's gaits to see whether they're coming up on a fall or not. I think all of that is really beneficial to the overall wellness of a person, of a human being, right? Like I feel like the reason we are going into this kind of care is to make people well longer, to live better lives longer. And any way that we can do that to support from the building level, I think is a huge win for the industry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Shirley, how about you?
Many things. I know we're short on time.
Yeah.
I would just say, SafelyYou has started in memory care. Obviously, we believe that our need is outside of memory care and AL and independent living and even home care. But in the near term, SafelyYou would love to be able to say, we don't need to have memory care locked units, right? And so can we actually, create an environment that allows that freedom and independence while keeping our residents safe, with minimizing the risk for our operators, and making our team efficient and keeping our staff engaged and empowered, right? And so, SafelyYou wants to create that type of environment through what we learn, and be able to share that.
Yeah, well said, both of you. I concur. I think that interconnection, the intersection of, bringing, different people together around solving these problems will spark additional ideas around where more technology can help in the future as well, in a really practical and functional way.
Hey, thank you all so much for your time and expertise today. We're going to take some time to answer our attendee questions. The first submitted question was, who should be having the conversations with family members as they prepare to make decisions about what can be brought into a room with a resident?
I can take that one. I think during the move-in process, it probably starts and depends on kind of what's happening with the resident and the family at the time that they're moving in. If there is opportunity to have some planning and a bit of conversation about it, and the ability to do some pre-assessment of the residents' fall risk status, that's helpful to know, and I think the staff then can have some of that conversation with them. I would say most likely what I typically, I guess, hear, and maybe Shirley, you have some other thoughts on this too, it typically tends to be either the executive director or the administrator of the community, or the director of nursing, or the head nurse that's a part of the community. That sometimes it's the sales director as well. Kind of depends on the situation, but I think being able to tailor a conversation that where you can help people think through what the needs might be. Sometimes they're out shopping for a brand new bed. They're having, they're trying to think through like what kind of chairs to bring in and how many pictures do we bring in and all these sorts of things. And starting slow, I think maybe coming with the basics and then kind of figuring out as we go are some of the more common things that I probably have either seen or have heard providers do. Shirley, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, we actually developed a move-in checklist to help our communities out, which is actually also on our fall resource hub that we have on our website, where you can download. But it's basically a checklist that we would recommend to actually send the families before moving in. It gives them at least some idea of what type of furniture they might want to consider bringing in. We also really advise sending them actually the floor plan and the measurements, right? Just as any of us, when we move into a new place, we always take the measurements and will my bed even fit, right? And so, and we've actually advised if there's a way for you to like even do it with them and actually say, hey, what size do you have a twin bed, and actually design it, before actually moving in, and that would actually give you a lot more insight into what actually should they be bringing in. But we do provide kind of the quick kind of checklist of what makes sense, and so you can manage that before that moving truck kind of happens. And unfortunately, you're going to have to like say, don't know if we can actually bring everything that's in that moving truck. So definitely advanced conversations are definitely critical, and give them some, expectations of what actually can fit into the room with their support. So
I think
the
that's
floor plan is exactly
yeah.
what I was going to say. That coupled with the checklist and, doing it together, will this fit, even providing some examples of what kinds of furniture people are seeing in there. That's key.
One key thing, just I'll add to the size of the bed. If somebody's been sleeping at home on a king or queen size bed, and now they're moving into a community that can only support a twin bed, that's a big shift for some people. And if you're used to being able to have space to roll around, or just that comfort level. So even the consideration for a wider twin, if that's the case, is something to keep in mind as well.
Excellent. That's great. And so the next question is, are there resources available for people working in communities who don't necessarily have a design background, but who want to learn about those small changes that could make a big impact within a room?
Yeah, I'll take the lead on that one. I think as we talked about in the last question, having that checklist for move-in could also be really beneficial to the change in condition as well. So as the condition changes, can you go through that checklist again and say, what are there things on this checklist that maybe triggered the resident? It doesn't take a design background, I think, to really work through a furniture layout, or adding a floor mat, or really kind of going into the room with a critical eye and just saying, okay, what is the resident doing? Are they trying to transfer? Okay, is there room to transfer here? So, as much as I would like to be hired for everything and to look at every room, I don't think it's necessary to have a design background to approach that with a critical eye to really see what kind of changes are needed.
Awesome.
Even having the pre-planned floor plan, right? So you could even just already send them off, already have sales and marketing, already have like the 4 different options that are already on the floor plan. And you could consult somebody like Erin, in advance, and just say, hey, help me draft what the templates kind of look like. And then from there, you guys can just kind of be off and running.
Yeah, and if we're designing a community, if we're designing a memory care community, we will already do those furniture layouts, whether we design the rooms, whether we do each individual room or not, we're going to be designing a couple of different iterations of that room. So that is something that we do provide to the communities upon completion, so they have access to those resources as well.
Excellent. Sounds like the information's out there. And so this next question was very specific to that third case study, those 2 still images. Does this need to be coded and reported as a fall, even though on video you can see that the resident did lower herself?
Yeah, great question. When you have the video, our communities are witnessing the event now, so they actually consider being able to watch the video. They are able to witness it, and then if they actually see that the resident just intentionally lowered themselves, it's very clear, and that she was safe. They actually would not categorize that as what we would assume would be an unintentional fall to a lower level. And so you are correct there. They would actually not report that as a fall, which is where SafelyYou has been really beneficial, because in a sense, we've been able to reduce what would have been considered falls, for those residents. And again, unnecessarily sending them out to the ER, right? So those are typically unwitnessed events. And depending on, what the resident might be communicating with you, you might be sending them out to the ER when she was just cued by her shoes, So, yeah.
Shirley, I would add to that, and to the person who asked the question as well, making that decision is probably built into your policies and procedures and your organization's approach to those sorts of incidents. And so before you make a change, you'll want to make sure you consult with either your attorney or your if you're part of a corporation, to make sure that your policies align with your practices then too. Like Shirley said, this is giving you new information now. And so it is relevant to go back and revisit, I think, those policies and make that decision together as a team to decide how you're going to approach that, and probably will require some additional education with your staff then too, if you decide to make a practice change.
all of our communities still document that it's still an event as well, because it is still an event for the resident that we want to minimize. So from a documentation perspective, we still want to document every event where the resident is found on the floor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and depending on the state, I think you're into, and I know we've been talking in context of senior living, which is regulated at the state level. You know, if we get into skilled nursing, there might be some different, you know, considerations for MDS documentation and other requirements there from a documentation perspective. But again, you know, I think it changes the situation. You know, we have better information now, so it's worth being able to go back and revisit your practices.
Excellent. And so next, do you have any suggested interventions for those wandering residents who continue to fall?
I could probably take this.
Yeah.
We have seen, you know, fall events where the resident that's not the resident's room actually wander into another resident's room and then think that's their bed or whatever, and then they end up falling in that room. And so when we see that, you know, repeatedly, a lot of times the advice is really just, it's about activity, you know, and get them engaged in something that's not that type. Why are they curious in a sense? I mean, you want to actually, you know, promote that type of curiosity, but at the same time, it's how do we kind of cue them into a different type of activity to make sure that you have eyes on that individual, is also something that we've recommended when we've seen repeat falls.
You know, from a design perspective, I think some of the things I've seen on dementia care units is looking at the walking patterns in the community and trying to understand if there's some natural places where people like to stop or congregate, or rethinking like seating areas, or creating opportunities for people to, you know, to sit, or, you know, even signage sometimes can be a cue as well, if they're trying to get someplace. So I think being able to look at the person holistically and try to understand where they're coming from, what it is that they're seeking, what they're looking to do, and then seeing if there's you know, ways to create some more safety there. It could also be you know, a trigger, a need to look at a therapy evaluation, or maybe you know, an opportunity to reevaluate medication as well. You know, if somebody's feeling dizzy when they get up, or if they're or they get lightheaded as they're walking and maybe exerting themselves a bit and feel like they need to lay down or sit down. Those are things I think that might warrant a medical evaluation or a therapy evaluation to see if there's something else that might be happening.
Mm-hmm. Good note there. And an excellent transition to our final question, which is, do we have any recommendations on tailoring fall scene investigations specific to a dementia patient or dementia unit?
Yeah, so SafelyYou is all about fall scene investigation, you know, that we can actually rewind and replay it over and over again. And so, you know, for us, we also have another toolkit available, which is called our fall scene investigation checklist. And it helps train, you know, we don't really want staff to always be having to grab a sheet of paper to write down the checklist, but the point is to train your staff to understand what to quickly look for, and that is available. But there's kind of the basics, you know, so when you walk into a fall scene, obviously you want to address the resident needs first, and then of course you want to take a look at the obvious in the room. Where's the mobility aid? What does the lighting look like? Are there any disheveled, you know, sheets and bed sheets? What's on the floor around that resident? We have actually learned at SafelyYou that 30% of falls, the resident actually moves position before care staff actually arrive. So if you can imagine, you know, in SafelyYou, the care staff arrives within minutes, but the resident will actually scoot themselves from one place in the room, like maybe at their bedside, and all of a sudden they're just really quick on the floor, and all of a sudden they appear across the room. So when you walk into the room, you actually might think that they were ambulatory and they fell by the dresser, right? So it's really critical to do a fall scene investigation, because 30% of the time, the resident actually might have been in a completely different location. And so it is really important to scan that room, look at kind of the quick things that seem obvious, but also maybe not that obvious, right? And so the mobility aid to us is like really critical, because when care staff do enter the room, And if the mobility is close by, that's the first thing they're going to move out of the way, right? They're going to actually disrupt the crime scene is what we kind of make that equivalent to. They actually disrupt the crime scene and they move the mobility aid, and all of a sudden, what, an hour later when your team does the fall huddle, you're like, okay, well, where was the mobility aid? You're like, I have no idea, and so because we moved it. Anyway, so we totally believe in having a proper fall scene investigation and really training it to your care staff, and even doing in-services and actually testing them if they set up a fall scene, right? And so SafelyYou is really big on we have several fall scenes available for community just to do role playing of saying, hey, let's actually have the care staff come into the room, do the fall scene. We really want to make it natural for care staff to do this on their own without that sheet of paper, but it's a great way to start.
Yeah, Shirley, I love that. And I love that. I would agree. I think we used to do those role-playing events as well as part of an educational, it can be fun, too, for the staff. And then we would encourage the staff to set them up for each other sometimes too, and getting them involved, because sometimes, they'll come up with things that they've seen, or sometimes it even triggers a thought that they hadn't thought of before, then too, something that they remembered. So, yeah, that's a great idea. I have a question, actually, Megan, if it's okay. I wanted to ask Shirley a question. Put you on the spot, Shirley. Can you? I recently heard that SafelyYou is launching SafelyYou University. So can you tell us a little bit more about that and what all that means, what that is all about? Sorry.
Yeah, so that kind of leads into why we know so much about fall scene investigation. We're actually, and I also kind of called out in the webinar about fall champions. So SafelyYou really wants to promote fall champions in every community, and so we've launched SafelyYou University that is specifically in building a fall champion. What we've designed is actually an education platform to merge fall prevention specifically with dementia care. Typically those type of education sessions are always separate, so your care staff have to go do their 1 hour training on fall prevention and their other 1 hour training of dementia care, but then they never actually talk to each other. And so, which is also why it's been really difficult to solve falls in memory care. And so SafelyYou has taken all of our lessons learned and actually have done this mashup, in a sense of merging those two type of education sessions and really trying to elevate, again, this fall champion. And so SafelyYou University does have, it's about an hour to become a fall champion, certified SafelyYou fall champion. And then you unlock actually all these in-service opportunities, which is what we kind of called out here right now about the fall scene investigation, for example. You get the toolkit, you get fall scenes of how to reenact some of these. And then we also give you some other things where you could do short in-services to, again, promote within to keep these sessions like exciting, kind of fun and interactive.
That's so cool. I hadn't had a chance to ask you about that yet, and thanks for sharing that. I think that's really great and speaks a lot to, I think, how you're continuing to try to figure out how to make SafelyYou as beneficial and part of the care team, really, is what it becomes then.
Yeah, and it's free. We want everybody to take it. It's and it'll actually have CEU credits soon, and we're excited about it.
That's terrific. Great. Thank you for answering that. I appreciate it.
That is exciting stuff. Thank you all, Liz, Erin, Shirley. I appreciate your time, your expertise, and spending this afternoon with us. Thank you so much. And now, for anyone interested in learning about how direct supply can help you navigate these new technologies and products, please help me welcome our Senior Product Manager, James Jensen.
Thank you, Megan, and thank you, Shirley, Erin, and Liz, for a wonderful presentation. It was great to learn about everything that you had to share and some of the insights that SafelyYou was able to provide. So the first piece of technology that we'd like to talk about here is SafelyYou. We've had a good partnership with them for the last about year now, and they're really innovating technology in the world of dementia care and really pioneering falls and how do we reduce falls using artificial intelligence to reduce falls in memory care settings up to 40%, as well as reduce ER-related visits or ER visits related to falls up to 80%. Just some fantastic work the team is doing. We've been really encouraged to see everything that they've been able to do, and as you guys witnessed here today, the insights they're gaining into how we change environments, how we help residents specifically, individually, and uniquely is very powerful. So if you're interested in the SafelyYou solution, and we've seen a lot of people really resonate towards this type of technology as falls have increased 20% since the start of COVID. Please feel free to reach out to us. You can visit us at directsupply.com/safely-you. Fill out a contact me form and we can have one of our consultants reach out to you, give you a demonstration of how SafelyYou works, and see if that would be a right solution for you and your communities. But again, just really some groundbreaking technology for fall prevention. Additionally, Direct Supply has a host of different design offerings. Erin was able to talk about some of what we're doing specific to memory care, but we have design services for planning, whether that's market intelligence, interiors assessments, or strategic project evaluation, as well as design, different architectural, interiors, technology, equipment planning. So if you find yourself needing some design services or design offerings, we have a whole host of experts really geared towards each of those different areas. And as Erin has stated, we have some ideas on new design trends and things that we can do in memory care to really assist in reducing falls. And that's going to be an ongoing journey. You can also procure products and things through Direct Supply to follow through on the designs. And we can also help in the construction vein as well. If you want to know more about the design offerings we have at Direct Supply, you can learn more at aptura.directsupply.com/expertise/interior-design. So please take a look at those design offerings, and if we can be of assistance, there's ways by which on that site that you can contact us and learn more about those design offerings. I did want to take a moment specifically to talk about one of the design offerings, that's technology design. Really deploying SafelyYou and other types of technology, nurse call, wander management, real-time locating, even Wi-Fi, and all of the structured cabling that goes into buildings. If you need assistance with some of that technology design, whether you're in new construction or if you're renovating a community or have intent to redesign or repurpose a building, we have experts that can help you through that technology journey. Understand what kind of technology is right for the kind of community you are, what's right for your census and your population, who you're marketing yourself to, and we can make sure that technology is a cohesive plan and everything goes in with intent and purpose, as well as the product procurement and the implementation of the systems, which is also a critical element to make sure everything that gets designed actually follows through into the building. So if you need more information about any kind of design services that we can offer, that's available at directsupply.com/solutions/technology design, as you can see here on the screen. And this information will be sent out to you as well. Megan will make sure you guys get that. But we have design services specific to technology, and SafelyYou is one of those partners that we can put into communities for you. And then last, you guys have heard a lot about different products, wheelchairs, furniture and storage, floor mats, and a few different things that Shirley, Erin, and Liz were able to talk about. We have actually curated and condensed some of the products that we have available at Direct Supply to make an immediate impact for you guys. If you know that you need specific products, we have a fall management as well as a memory care page. You can see those here on the screen. You can go online. And we've been able to curate a smaller condensed list of products that would be right specific for the fall management and memory care populations in your communities, as not all products are right for these audiences. We've tried to narrow that down to make the selections easier, but if you have questions on specific products relative to either your memory care audience or specific residents or individuals who may need assistance, maybe you learned something new here today on the webinar and had a question, please feel free to reach out to your account manager at Direct Supply. They are more than happy to assist in that conversation, and we do have product specialists here at Direct Supply that can also assist with the conversation and make make sure that you're picking the right products for your residents and their specific needs.
Thank you to Erin, Liz, Shirley, and you, James, for all of your hard work and expertise today. And thank you to all of our attendees. Have a great rest of your day.